Welcome to the Volatility Box review for July 11th, 2019. In today's review, we're going to talk about how we used the Vol Box to trade Powell's testimony at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. To trade his testimony, we focused just on four tickers really today. So we had the S&P, the Dow, the Nasdaq, and the Russell futures, and that was it. That was our focus for the day, and that actually led to some fairly good opportunities, and it allowed us to stay small and nimble in an otherwise volatile market. The end result of today with a one lot in our smaller account was a positive 740 trading just the S&P, the Dow, and the Nasdaq futures, and our two lot P&L trading just those three was 1280 today. Okay, enough numbers. Let's dive into the charts. So Powell's testimony, like we mentioned, happened at 10 o'clock, so right here, and you see shortly thereafter, the market started to fall down perfectly into the volatility box. What we noticed here, just before we dive into each of the trades, is at least with Powell's testimony, we noticed that the Nasdaq was falling the steepest, the Dow was falling the least, and the S&P was somewhere in between. And so the interesting adaptation to make in markets like these is to take the one that's falling the hardest and use the most conservative levels on that particular ticker, which in this case happened to be the Nasdaq futures. And then the other two can remain either on the aggressive or the conservative levels. We chose to stick with the aggressive levels given the morning's activity and just to use the Nasdaq on the slightly more conservative levels. With that, let's dive into the actual trade. So the trade took place in the S&P once Powell's testimony took place, and we had the reaction shortly thereafter, and we faded the initial reaction here. And so the entry was right here, fairly close to the 3,000 mark, and our play was a risk of 4.5 points, which was right outside of the volatility box. And our first target was once again the 4.5, which we hit right here. And then we also did go on to hit our actual target line, which was at 6 points. And then we continued to run up with our last runner for a grand total of 9 points on the S&P. A similar setup happened on the Dow. So if we change over to the Dow charts, you'll notice, once again, very similar reaction. So we had Powell's testimony, and we had the reaction from the testimony. We faded that reaction. And the Dow was the strongest out of all three tickers, and so it also had the strongest move up. Our entry took place right here. You had one shot at it, but you had plenty of time knowing that the market was falling down, especially with the S&P and the Dow. Our risk was outside of the volatility box, 35 points wide. And our first target was once again 35, which we hit right here actually. We also hit our target line fairly easily, which was another 35 points, I believe. And our final runner went up for a grand total of 98 points. Let's move on to the Nasdaq. And so what you'll notice on the Nasdaq is the Nasdaq fell the hardest. And you could tell coming in as soon as we were falling that the Nasdaq was the one leading the charge for the volatility box. So on the Nasdaq, we decided to use our conservative levels to play the entry, knowing full well that we expected the Nasdaq to fall slightly deeper in order to get our trade entries in the S&P and the Dow, which it looked like we were going to get. So in the Nasdaq, once we used the conservative levels, our entry was once again at the volatility box, in which case you had plenty of time to get in. Our stop was outside, which was 17 points wide. And what you'll notice here is the Nasdaq actually only did go up for another, let's say 19 points in total. So it gave you your initial T1, but that was it. And so what you notice here, the takeaways from today's lesson, is at least with a testimony like this, where you expect an event to move the markets, we noticed that one market usually falls harder than the other two. In this case today, it was the Nasdaq, which fell the hardest. The S&P is generally a mixture of both the Nasdaq and the Dow. It kind of plays in the middle, and so that fell medium. And the Dow, if you noticed, only gave us one entry before it took off, and it also took off the strongest. And so the strongest two markets really gave us just our aggressive entries today, with nice follow-throughs, and our weakest market gave us our conservative entry with T1, so still a profitable trade, but it was definitely the Nasdaq and the Dow that gave us our big winners today. We used the volatility box today to trade Powell's testimony. We stayed small, we stayed nimble, and we stayed focused on just the four indices, which gave us a total of 3 trades today. With those 3 trades, our one lot P&L was $740. and 2 lots using runners was upwards of 1280. And so our 3-day total right now, at least once we started making these videos, as you can see, has been really profitable. In fact, we haven't had a losing day yet. We'll do a weekly total once we finish on Friday, so we don't get too ahead of ourselves here. But so far, as hopefully these videos are showing you, the volatility box is powerful. It gives you an edge, it helps you find the edge, and it helps you profit from the edge. Download the volatility box today at tosindicators.com/volatilitybox. Thanks, and see you tomorrow.